At the weekend, voter registration campaigns led by senior political party leaders began in earnest across the country. As you can expect in a campaign season, the pre-election political mudslinging also got underway. From overtures by no less than President Ramaphosa and his deputy for EFF leader Julius Malema to rejoin the ANC, the rejection of that offer and an SMS sent by the Democratic Alliance saying land reform means the parties in support of it are coming for your home. Well, joining us now to unpack his plans for the governing party is ANC Elections head and former Minister Fikile Mbalula. Good evening to you and thank you for your time.
Good evening to all the listeners, viewers at home and you.
Well, let's start. I mean, it is election season, right? So all's fair in love and war, you might say. Let's start with that SMS by the DA. Will you take people's homes?
No, obviously the DA was trying to embark on a dirty campaign, act of desperation. They know that land expropriation without compensation does not mean taking anybody's home. In fact, it's below the belt what they did, total exposure, total desperation. It is not about that.
Many would say, of course, it's not only the DA who finds themselves in a bit of a spot of bother in terms of running out of ideas. The ANC itself faces exactly that crisis.
No, the ANC is not run out of ideas. It's a governing party, and it will always be challenged in terms of its track record. And to us, going to an election is always an important moment of reporting back, and at the same time looking ourselves at the mirror and humbling ourselves to the voters for the things that we might have done that are wrong, that we have long accepted that where we are wrong we'll correct and we'll consolidate the good things that we need to do. But we cannot be alone in this journey. We are a liberation movement. We've got to work with our people in all sectors of society. And we are in that journey and that path right now as we speak.
But if we look at what you've been doing of late, I mean, the EFF can rightly claim to be leading you by the nose on key issues, land reform, free higher education. You're playing catch up.
Well, there is what is called easy victories. And that is what I think the EFF does. But
had they not made noise about these things, you'd taken your eye off the ball.
It's not that they didn't make noise or we're taking our eye off the ball. We had a conference to run. We came from that conference re-energized with a clear program on all these issues. And Nazareth has spoken. And that's what we're implementing. To us, it was not a hassle, not even to think for a moment when they put the motion on the table for us to agree with them. Last year, we're not populist. We take our time. We reflect.
So what changed?
It's because we reflected, we took a decision at conference, we've got a mandate, and that mandate is what we're implementing. So we converged with the EFF on that particular score to implement the resolution of the ANC conference.
Or some might say you saw the writing on the wall, you began to understand the realities, the political dynamics in which you find yourselves, and you realize that if you don't play catch up, they're going to run away with it.
There is no catch up. We took our time. If we're populist and we're playing catch up, we'll have agreed with them even when we don't have a resolution on that. But to show that we're not populist, we think before and we apply our mind. That's why we have to wait and get the mandate for our structures and to implement. We agree with them, and if we converge with them on such a fundamental question that affects South Africa over the years, and to accelerate the pace, because we talk from experience. And that is why we are at par in relation to the implementation of that.
Your party remains quite divided. You were on the wrong side of what was decided at Nasrec. You've had to eat a bit of humble pie yourself personally, haven't you?
I don't know what is democracy and how people understand it. It's about robustness, expressing one's view without fear or favor. It happens in all political parties. It happens in the DA. It's more robust in the ANC because we lead society. And when it happens in all other political parties, okay, it is democracy, they are elected democratically. We don't have kings and queens in our movement. We've got views, and dissent is acceptable in our organization. We come from that moment, and that is why we are very clear going forward. When people torment me and say that, he's leaking the current president so fast he forgot that he was opposed to him. They don't understand the democracy of the ANC. That when a leader, even if you are on the other side, once he's elected, no matter what happens, he's the leader of the organization and our party. And that's where we are now, moving forward, closing ranks, and mobilizing, going forward, building our organization.
Oh, there are those who say you're merely singing for your supper, that even in your current role, that really this is a demotion, you're no longer a member of cabinet, that's what they mean when they say you're eating humble pie.
Well, let history be the judge. Every step I've taken, it has always been characterized by people saying that it's a demotion, it's a demotion, it's a demotion. I don't know what is a demotion. Take me anywhere. To me, this is a humongous, big task for our organization, and I'm happy to perform. I'm excited. I'm on the field, and I'm in charge. And the organization is behind me, and I'm working with a collective. I'm over the moon, and I like challenges. And the ANC have built me for this moment. Positions come and go. If you attach your heart to them, yes, you've got feelings, but you must understand that the position doesn't belong to you. You can be shifted anytime. Your
career has been dogged by controversy on many, many occasions. I mean, how much do you look back and maybe admit to yourself and those around you that maybe you've scored some own goals? Let's go back to the night of the reshuffle, for example. I mean, you practically preempted the president by changing your byline on Twitter and then had to quickly change it back because the announcement hadn't actually been made.
No, I didn't change the byline on Twitter. The byline changed after the announcement.
No, it changed before. I was watching it.
No, it changed after, in terms of after the announcement. And
before the announcement was made, you said you said former Minister of Police. That's what you said, and the announcement hadn't been made. It was in that period when we were waiting for the final information.
There was no preempting. The decision had already been made.
So why didn't you wait for the president to make it and say it?
No, I mean, it was a moment in which already a decision had actually been made. It was a matter of time and space.
But it's that sort of thing that people will look at and say, you're not disciplined, you're not somebody who can even wait for the president to make an announcement about his cabinet, which is his prerogative, but you're going to go ahead and run loose on social media.
No, I didn't run loose. You can exaggerate the way you want. I'm very disciplined. I insist on that. And even with regard to that, I didn't know whether or not there was change in relation to myself, except for the fact that the party had asked me to go to headquarters.
You're known as Minister Razzmatazz, which is perhaps something that's more suitable in your current role, but maybe not so much for the Minister of Police.
I don't know. I mean, I served in the Ministry of Police for less than a year. And then you could say and judge for yourself. It looked like I was there for many years.
The criticism, though, was often that your bombastic style got in the way of the serious job you had to do.
You will always be criticized for doing something and for working. If you don't do anything, people will not remember you for anything. But remember the good things that I did. And of course, in doing those things, there will be mistakes. We are human, and that is it. And history will be the judge. But within that period, difficult decisions, programs were undertaken. And I think there will be no lapse because it's a handover to somebody more or less whom in terms of our approach were combative in terms of fighting crime and making things happen. So the energy will brush off to the other because Fikile is that kind of individual.
And I mean, I suppose you and Fikile, you could say, are in the same WhatsApp group in terms of your approach to policing. Are you happy that that's who replaced you?
If the ANC will replace fear for with fearsome somebody, I will say they've made a mistake. So they've gone even extreme from fear for God. So
but it's exactly that kind of language, though.
Was very combative. No, the criminals must understand. We can't be soft when we deal with dangerous criminals who terrorize society. At the end of the day, there must be peace, but there must be war with those who promote war.
But surely what criminals understand is you beefing up the police and helping officers on the ground to be able to be better investigators, be able to catch criminals and make sure you're getting convictions from the suspects that you arrest. Talking tough is one thing. It makes for great headlines. It puts you on television like we are now talking, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the criminals are going to be caught.
No, tough must be matched with action. So toughness means that our tactical response to crime must be improved, which is what is important. So you talk tough, but at the same time you are able to act. And there are instances where people have been gripped with fear and terrorized by criminals. And the Engobo was one such action, and the takedown of dangerous criminals through the Octa strategy spoke to that. Not only the minnows in the street, but go for the dangerous and bring them down. 65 hours. Police were able to respond and take them down. That's what is important. It means you walk the walk, you walk the talk.
So let's look at what lies ahead as we build up to 2019. I mean, you've already said in this interview that this is a mammoth task. What does it take to run the machinery of an ANC election campaign?
The ANC election campaign and the campaign in South Africa is a huge campaign, huge interest, highly politicized nation. Just 1 week of registration. More than 2.7 people have registered. Went to check, and it shows the interest. Political parties all out. It was as though we are in the election campaign. So it tells you that it's a mammoth of task. And for once, the ANC for the first time took a decision that at the political level must release some of its members to be full-time at Luthuli House, among others, to focus on the task of elections, because we've been wishy-washy about it and not taking decisions about this particular task. But now, the firmness and the decisive action from Nazareth to date, I think to firm up our organizational structures is what is important for me.
It's also likely to be the most consequential election. I mean, for the first time since 1994, your party faces the real prospect it may not win.
We're up to the challenge. And it is not the talk that will define the moment and the day of whether or not we'll
But let's be honest, the legacy of former President Jacob Zuma has hurt your party. You can't deny that.
What has happened in relation to the party, and in particular, what you may characterize as President Zuma phenomenon, it is a matter that in terms of what we need to do as a party going forward, we will be able to deal with it.
But you can't pretend it didn't happen. We are here right now because many voters are disillusioned with your party and they're not seeing much of a break with what was going on during President Zuma's tenure. It's going to hurt you next year, isn't it?
It is your conclusion that it will hurt the
Well,
African...
it's a question. What do you think?
I think that the ANC has been able to respond to whatever criticism, and it has been able to self-correct.
How have you done so? What have you done?
The African National Congress have acted on its own in relation to the future of President Zuma, and President Zuma have acted also equally and resigned. And in this particular instance, we're in a path in which we've got a new president in the country, and the ANC leads. So in this particular instance, you must embrace the moment in which the ruling party on its own took a decision and former president responded. And we're in a path of renewal as we speak.
Because you're here, I must ask you one final question. You've recently made admissions about regrets in your own personal life, in your private life, about things that you could have done differently. I mean, where does Fikile Mbalula, the man, the politician, find himself at this time?
Well, I find myself in a moment in which I execute my role as an activist and a member of the ANC and doing what I'm asked to do willingly, and I enjoy it and I accept it as a challenge, and working with a collective, which is what I enjoy. With regard to personal life, I think we go through ups and downs, and I've gone through that over a time, and that is behind me, and I'm building a happy family going forward, and which is very supportive to my work going forward.
The year of 2018 being the year of Nelson Mandela, as you look back on 100 years since the birth of the first leader of our democracy, where does the party stand in terms of the image of Nelson Mandela and his lasting impact?
The ANC stands at the point in which Nelson Mandela's legacy live with us, and at the same time we've got to espouse those values that Nelson Mandela stood for in practice and in governance going forward. Nelson Mandela is a global icon, and for us, that he was a member of the ANC and a leader of our movement, we pride ourselves of that, but he belongs to the world and the people of South Africa. We are honored at this moment of history when Nelson Mandela 100 years is celebrated by the world. We are the party at the center of that celebration by virtue of Mandela having come out of the ranks of the African National Congress. We've got more responsibility than anybody to live Mandela's legacy.
I will say that it's an old message, it's a familiar message, it's one that has served you in the past, but many of your critics would say they don't quite recognize this ANC from that of Nelson Mandela. Whether or not it still can pay dividends for you remains to be seen. Fikile Mbalula, the ANC Elections Chief, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bungan, and all the viewers.
All right, we'll go back to Francis.
Thanks, Bongani.